Once again, Christian greetings to all our valued listeners and viewers throughout the whole world, even more particularly to all our fellow Shepherd's Rod believers, and most especially to our beloved brothers and sisters in the United States of America. Special greetings to our brethren in Colorado, in Georgia, in Kansas, in Missouri, in Texas, Arkansas, Chicago, Illinois, in California, in New York, in Pennsylvania, in Canada, Fiji Island, Mexico, Spain, in Africa, Kenya, Pakistan, Zambia, to the United Kingdom, to our brethren in Australia, and also to our brethren in Malaysia and in Indonesia, as well as in Papua New Guinea. And to the rest of the 144,000 living saints scattered abroad, greetings. May the good Lord bless you, my dear brothers and sisters. This special message is lovingly and particularly dedicated to all the candidates to be translated to heaven without seeing death. This is our special episode number 36, just an hour exposition of the prophecy, as the last final warning message just prior to the close of provision. I would like to begin our study reading tract number 14 on page 22. It says, "Therefore, only as they awake and give heed to the voice of the true witness, and turn their steps toward the gates of the kingdom, may they ever hope to participate in the divine eventuality. O Judah, keep thy solemn feast, perform thy vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee." It says, he is utterly cut off. So, here the shepherd's rod is plainly telling us that only if we will be awakened and then give heed to the voice of the true witness. We know that the true witness is Jesus Christ. And of course, that is pointing to the testimony of Jesus Christ. So, the situation by which our case will be, it seems hopeless if we continually pretend that we are on the situation and the position that we are spiritually awakened. I remember the statement on tract number 5 on page 14. Tract number 5, page 14, it says, "Such will never recover from their terrible blindness until they begin to search for eyesalve, inspiration, as they do for gold, for only new truth can open their eyes, unmask their errors, and woo them to the truth." So it says, only the new truth can open our eyes, according to the shepherd's rod. Now, let us focus to the statement in tract number 14, page 22, saying, to participate in the divine eventuality. So, Nahum 1 verse 15 is pointing to that predicted event, divine eventuality. And I do fully believe that that divine eventuality is pointing to the antitypical Passover. Here on 2TG 42, page 41, it says, "Behold upon the mountains the feet of him that bringeth good tidings, that publisheth peace. O Judah, keep thy solemn feast, perform thy vows, for the wicked shall no more pass through thee. He is utterly cut off." Then it says, here you see that the announcement of this long-expected event. So, Nahum 1 verse 15, it is an expected event. It says, here you see that the announcement of this long-expected event is to be made by someone's publications. Moreover, he publishes peace and thus announces the restoration of the kingdom. This is the only peace that the world can have. There is to be no other. Those who keep God's solemn feast, and perform their vows shall have this peace. None others shall. So, the voice of inspiration is very plain that only those who keep God's solemn feast and perform their vows shall have this peace. What peace? The peace in God's kingdom. Now, what is the solemn feast? Let's read again the statement on Patriarchs and Prophets, 537. It says, there were 3 annual assemblies of all Israel for worship and the sanctuary. Exodus 23 verse 14 to 16. Shiloh was for a time the place of these gatherings, but Jerusalem afterward became the center of the nation's worship, and here the tribes convened for the solemn feast. Patriarchs and Prophets, 537. So, the voice of inspiration is plainly telling you and I that the solemn feast represent or pointing to the annual gatherings. And answerer number 3 on page 11, it says, answerer number 3, page 11, it says, and so it is that the Passover, the Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles, the 3 most important feasts in the year. So the 3 most important feasts in the year: Passover, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. That statement is very significant to the saints that will be translated to heaven, no longer to taste death. Here in tract number 8 on page 74, it says, as the Passover and the slaughter of the firstborn, first fruits, who had not the blood on the doorpost, released God's ancient people from the bondage of Egypt, so shall the antitypical Passover, Ezekiel 9 verse 4, Isaiah 66 verse 16, free the first fruits, the 144,000, his firstborn now, from the bondage of sin and sinners today. So, it points out to the antitypical Passover. So, that antitypical Passover is pointing to the sealing of the 144,000 living saints. And that is one of the divine eventuality mentioned in tract number 14, page 22. Now, let us read 2SR 169. It says, again, we note at the time of the Passover in Egypt, the blood on the doorpost was a type of the marking or sealing. In that night, wherever the blood appeared on the doorpost, the firstborn, whether male or female, perished not. Just so now, those who received the seal have applied the blood on the doorpost, forehead. And as the firstborn of both classes, those who died and those who did not, were a type of the present priesthood ministry. Evidently, the type points forward to a ministry in the antitype, made up of both sexes. The firstborn, who died, represent the class that shall fall under the slaughter weapons of the 5 men. And the firstborn who escaped from death represent the class that shall receive the mark of the men with the writer's inkhorn and pass from death to life. Thus the firstborn who lived and passed through the Red Sea are a type of the 144,000. The first fruits of the harvest are the servants of God in the time of the loud cry of the third angel's message. 2SR page 169. So, let us distinctly separate the occurrence in the type that at midnight there was a great cry in the land of Egypt. And of course, that is before God's people crossed the Red Sea. So let us distinctly separate those who died or the destruction before ancient Israel crossed the Red Sea and the destruction when ancient Israel crossed the Red Sea, and also the destruction in the wilderness, and also the destruction when they crossed the Jordan River. For all those events are typological. So, our subject at this time is concerning the destruction that will occur on that antitypical Passover, by which, accordingly, only the firstborn sons were in danger. So let us read again. In 1SR Pocket Edition, page 55 and page 56, it says, when will this come to pass? The type unquestionably reveals the time through the fact that only the firstborn were in danger. It says, accordingly, the antitypical Passover will take place in the time of the first fruit harvest, the sealing of the 144,000, the first fruits, the first to go to antitypical Jerusalem, the first to stand on Mount Zion with the Lamb, the firstborn by the Spirit. Obviously, all of the first fruits who receive the mark will live on, and all who fail to receive the mark will perish, as surely as did the firstborn, who at the time of the typical Passover failed to apply the blood on the doorpost. One is our pocket edition, pages 55 and page 56. So, the voice of inspiration is plainly telling brothers and sisters that all the firstborn represent ministry. In 1SR, on page 96, it says, the firstborn, a symbol of a class of priesthood, a representation of Ezekiel 9, verse 6, last part, the ancient men that were before the house. So, the firstborn represent ministry or priesthood, according to the shepherd's rod. And, for example, in 1TG 31, page 9, 1TG 31, page 9, it says, the firstborn, first fruits, who failed to paint the doorpost with the sacrificial blood in the first Exodus, the type perish. So any of the first fruits of today who fails to comply with the demands of the message for today will as certainly perish at the angels' slaughter weapons. Ezekiel 9, verse 5 and 6. Now, I would like to remind again that according to the shepherd's rod, concerning Ezekiel 9, or the slaughter in Ezekiel 9, here in 3 Symbolic Code, number 1, page 8, it says, therefore, as there are two separations, there is a double fulfillment of Ezekiel's slaughter. One in the church before the close of provision, and the other in the worldly churches after the close of provision. So, there are two slaughtering. The first slaughtering takes place before probation closes. But to be more specific, the first slaughtering takes place before probation closes to all Sabbath keepers. And the second slaughtering takes place after probation closes to all Sabbath keepers. The first slaughtering that will take place before probation closes to all Sabbath keepers, the only one that will be destroyed in that destruction are only the firstborn sons. Whereas the destruction after probation closes to all Sabbath keepers, those will be slain at that time are all Sabbath keepers who failed to obtain the seal of the living God in their foreheads. And it is called the general destruction of all the wicked Sabbath keepers. Now, I would like to read that statement on tract number 15, page 76. So it says here, no, inspiration would not thus confuse its terms and still expect us to comprehend its teachings, to know how to interpret its symbols, and when to expect the actual events to take place. So that is very plain. That statement can easily be understood that every term, there must be an accurate significance. Inspiration will not confuse the significance of each term. And according to the shepherd's rod, the leadership represented by the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is represented by Perau, 1SR, page 77. And remember, Perau, in the type, never been categorized as firstborn. In that midnight slaughtering, in the type, Perau were not slain. But rather, it is Perau that bitterly cried out in that occurrence when he saw that all the firstborn sons in the land of Egypt perish. So what I'm trying to emphasize that the antitypical Perau is the leadership in the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Therefore, the leadership in the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church cannot be called firstborn sons, but rather antitypical Perau. Now let us read 1SR, page 77. Another Perau arose. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Exodus 1, verse 8. If the first Perau, who exalted Joseph, represented by Christ, represented the leadership in the days of the apostles, then this new pharaoh must represent the leadership of this present movement at the time this subject became known. And we know that it was in 1930. Note, this new pharaoh knew not Joseph or do not recognize Jesus Christ. The meaning is that the leadership of this organization has left following their master, which is Jesus Christ, as stated in Volume 5, page 217. So, in this reading, the shepherd's rod made it so plain that the leadership of the Seventh-day Adventist Church General Conference is represented by antitypical pharaoh. It is very important to have definite understanding every term in its antitypical fulfillment to avoid confusion. Now, I would like to go back again to our reading in 1SR page 96. Let's read again. It says, the firstborn, a symbol of a class of priesthood, a representation of Ezekiel 9 verse 6. So what is the firstborn, brothers and sisters? A representation of Ezekiel 9 verse 6. Now let me read to you tract number 8 on page 24. Tract number 8, page 24. It says, it is located to John in the symbol of the two-horned beast coming up not out of the sea but out of the earth. Revelation 13 verse 11. The only place where trees naturally grow. So do not forget that statement. The only place where trees naturally grow. And then it says, and as according to Daniel 4 verse 20 to 22, trees are figurative of rulers. Therefore, the trees in this instance represent the ancient men before the house. What is Ezekiel 9 verse 6? Represents the firstborn. But in this reading, in tract number 8, page 24, what is represented by Ezekiel 9 verse 6? Represented the trees. So the ancient men represent the trees. Remember, brothers and sisters, in Revelation chapter 7, let us read. Revelation chapter 7 verse 3. It says, Revelation chapter 7 verse 3, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea. Saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. I would like to read again, tract number 8, page 24. It says, it is located to John in the symbol of the two-horned beast coming up, not out of the sea, but out of the earth. Revelation 13:11. The only place where trees naturally grow. And as according to Daniel 4 verse 20 to 22, trees are figurative of rulers. Therefore, the trees in this instance represent the ancient men. In 1SR page 96, what is Ezekiel 9 verse 6? Ezekiel 9 verse 6 represent the firstborn sons. There is no dispute to the fact that the leadership of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the General Conference, can also be called trees. But such tree never represented as firstborn sons, but rather represented by antitypical pharaoh. 1SR page 77. And the firstborn sons in the Seventh-day Adventist Church are all of them under that leadership. The ministry under that leadership are called the firstborn sons. Now, let us analyze closely the statement given by the shepherd's rod. The only place where trees naturally grow is in the United States of America. But the mere fact that the Bible says in Revelation 7, verse 3 and 4, that there are trees on the earth as well as on the sea, brothers and sisters, can only be easily understood that majority of the trees are found and located in the United States of America. Very seldom to find trees on the sea. Because the only place by which trees naturally grow is on the earth, represented by the United States of America. Obviously, therefore, brothers and sisters, majority of the firstborn sons, because the trees represent firstborn sons, majority of the firstborn sons were located on the earth, the United States of America, represented by the trees. The only place by which trees naturally grow. There are trees on the sea, but it is not natural. only few of trees that can grow on the sea. Literally, because the illustration of Jesus Christ is perfect. According to tract number 3 on page 65, His illustrations are perfect. And second, the Bible is very plain. The very first one mentioned in Revelation 7 verse 3 is the earth. Hurt not the earth. Therefore, we can easily understand that immediately after the 144,000 are completely sealed, the hurting begins. Well, it must be on the earth. And who are they that will be hurt? The trees, represented by the firstborn sons. I would like to read this reading. 7 Symbolic Code, 7 to 12, page 21. 7 Symbolic Code, 7 to 12, page 21. It says, the seal of the living God, however, by which the 144,000 are sealed, Revelation 7 verse 2, is a special seal, being the same as the mark of Ezekiel 9. See Testimonies to Ministers, page 445. It says, demanding one sighing and crying over the abominations, not only in himself, but also in the church. Ezekiel 9 verse 4. It is placed upon him just before the Lord slays the wicked in the church. So it says, it is placed upon him just before the Lord slays the wicked in the church, so that the angels may pass over them. It is the antitypical Passover seal, the blood on the doorpost today. The angel is to place a mark upon the forehead of all who are separated from sin and sinners, and the destroying angel will follow to slay utterly both old and young. Now here the shepherd's rod made it so plain, saying, it is the antitypical Passover seal, the blood on the doorpost today. Now of course, if you will say antitypical Passover, then it must be on the exact day. And that is one of the reasons why the restoration of the Bible creation calendar is in absolute importance. Let's read again in Answerer number 3, page 9 and page 10. Answerer number 3, page 9 and page 10. It says, thus the all-knowing one, he who created the heavenly bodies, and knows the very moment he set them in motion, to govern the day, the month, and the year, decreed that the holy feast be observed in the very month on the very day on which they were first ordained. Who decreed? The all-knowing one, God himself. Thus, the holy feast be observed in the very month and on the very day on which they were first ordained. Since we are studying the experience of ancient Israel in Egyptian bondage, by which according to 1 SR 115 and 116, it says, the experiences of the children of Israel in Egypt was a photograph of our denomination. Thus, their experience is being reproduced in every particular with these people. So, the experiences of the children of Israel in Egypt, it says it was a photograph of our denomination. We know the denomination mentioned in that reading is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And here in 1 SR, page 76, it says, the land of Goshen. The beginning of this denomination was typified by Israel's entrance into Egypt as previously explained. We shall now consider the truth of the land of Goshen. Joseph brought Israel into Egypt and gave them the part of the land to dwell in, which was the best land in the country of Egypt. And there Joseph noticed them, their flocks, herds, and cattle, and all they had. See Genesis 45 verse 10. The land of Goshen stands as a symbol of the United States of America, in which the church came into existence. While our country is productive like the land of Goshen, the richest in the world, and a Protestant nation, it is the best for missionary work, for it is made up of all nations, and therefore, like the land of Goshen, the most productive in Egypt of the world. Therefore, Sister White, as well as Betty Hotep, were living in a time when God's people are still in Egypt. And Betty Hotep himself made it so plain in 2SR page 275, saying, but the perfect fulfillment of the prophetic period of Abraham in its antitype is yet in the future, going out of Egypt. So that statement is very plain. Betty Hotep made it so plain that that antitypical fulfillment in its perfect fulfillment, going out of Egypt was still future in his days. And since according to the type, there was no such incident that God, ancient people, Israel, they were observing the holy feast while they were still in Egypt. According to Patriarchs and Prophets, it says here on page 757, Patriarchs and Prophets, page 757. In the command for Israel's release, the Lord said to Pharaoh, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. Let my son go, that he may serve me. Exodus 4, verse 22 to 23. The psalmist tells us why God delivered Israel from Egypt. He brought forth his people with joy and his chosen with gladness, and gave them the lands of the heathen. And they inherited the labor of the people, that they might observe his statutes and keep his laws. Psalms 105, verse 43 to verse 45. Here we learn that the Hebrews could not serve God in Egypt. Or in other words, if God's people could be able to observe the holy feast in Egypt, there is no need for God to take out his people from Egypt. The mere fact that God takes out his people from Egypt, from the Egyptian bondage, because the appointed time has come that they need to observe the holy feast. And that event is typological, by which such event did not occur in the days of Betihotep. And that is the reason why God did not bestow to Betihotep the understanding of the restoration of the Bible creation calendar. In the type, the creation calendar was destroyed by the Egyptian Empire. The Bible creation calendar, there are only 360 days every year. But the Egyptian calendar, there are 365 days. And historically, both the Julian and the Gregorian calendar, in reality, it was copied only from the Egyptian calendar with slightest changes. But the result is the same, 365 days every year. Although the Egyptian calendar, there was no leap year. Only the Julian and the Gregorian calendar, by which there is a leap year every fourth year. And of course, the creation calendar was destroyed by the exceeding great horn during the Dark Ages. And the only calendar which is familiar even to the Christians are the Gregorian calendar. And here in tract number 10 on page 38, it says, do the nations of today do not follow the biblical monthly calendar? What is the biblical monthly calendar? There are only 30 days every month, 12 months in a year. 12 times 30 equals 360. That is biblical monthly calendar. 30 days every month. Now let us read tract number 10, page 38. Do the nations of today do not follow the biblical monthly calendar, that in no wise alters the fact that the original weekly cycle has never been changed. Or in other words, the weekly cycle never been destroyed. If you will read tract number 10, page 37, it says, let's read tract number 10, page 37. This historical record plainly shows that the weekly period of 7 days has continued unbroken from time immemorial, that Rome did not abolish the Christian week, but the Roman, and that the one which took its place was the same as the Jewish or the Christian Jewish weekly cycle or Christian weekly cycle. Never been changed, never been destroyed. In page 35, in tract number 10, it says, there is no doubt in the minds of any that the Jewish and apostolic churches in Christ's time were keeping the right Sabbath day, and that the zeal which the Roman Emperor Constantine had for the Christian faith would have absolutely forbidden him to abolish the Christian calendar and to establish another which would annihilate both the Sabbath of creation and their memorial of the resurrection. So it is very plain that God fully protected the weekly cycle. And we know that the prime mover of this act to abolish and to destroy the weekly cycle is Satan. But God forbidden him to do such thing. It says here in tract number 10, page 38, do the nations of today do not follow the biblical monthly calendar that in no wise alters the fact that the original weekly cycle has never been changed. And as it is entirely independent of both the solar and the lunar calendars, had God not preserved it intact throughout all the ages, the saints now, in the times of restitution of all things, would have great difficulty to restore it and to vindicate its integrity. Of course, the statement to restore it and to vindicate its integrity cannot be applied to the weekly cycle. Nothing to restore to the weekly cycle because the weekly cycle never been changed. The weekly cycle never been destroyed, but rather pointing to the biblical monthly calendar. The reason why God preserved intact throughout the ages the weekly cycle is that is the only key, the only medium that God will use in the divinely appointed time when the Bible creation calendar will be restored again. The absolute source of such restoration is the weekly cycle. But what is the appointed time? When would be that appointed time by which all things must be restored? Now, I would like to read first 1 TG 28 on page 1 TG number 28, page 15. It says, the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the judgment for the living, the day in which all things are to be restored. 1 TG 28, page 15. When would be all things are to be restored? In the judgment for the living. Here's another statement in 1 TG number 11, page 12. 1 TG number 11, page 12. Blind to this truth, to the judgment for the living, the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the day in which all things are to be restored. The voice of inspiration made it so plain that the divinely appointed time when all things are to be restored, it is in the period of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the judgment for the living. Here in answerer number 3 on page 88, it says, and looking forward to the time of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, the time just ahead of us, the Lord admonishes the people who will be living at that time. Remember ye the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded unto him in Horeb, for all Israel with the statutes and judgments. Malachi 4 verse 4. That statement is pointing to God's holy feast, the solemn feast. B.T. Hotep says, looking forward to the time of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, plainly indicating that the great and dreadful day of the Lord is still future in the days of B.T. Hotep. And he says, just ahead of us. Although B.T. Hotep expected to be among the 144,000, he also expected that he will still be living when the great and dreadful day of the Lord will begins. But that expectation do not materialize. He died before the event. Brethren, the probationary time is fast running out. To evade the truth will not profit us at all. 100%, brothers and sisters, the knowledge concerning the Bible creation calendar never been bestowed by God to B.T. Hotep. But we guaranteed to you 100% that this statement in answerer number 1, page 49, saying, and the light may come solely from within the message itself. So whatever light concerning the restoration of the Bible creation calendar, it is taken exclusively, solely within the Shepherd's Rod publications itself. The only thing is that, although it was already in the Shepherd's Rod publications, but the understanding were not given by God to B.T. Hotep. The statement in Great Controversy 344 must be applied. Even the prophets who had been favored by God with a special illumination of the Spirit, did not fully comprehend all the messages that they had written. The same with Daniel. The same with John the Revelator. The same with Sister White. Sister White has an abundance statements concerning the premillennial kingdom in her own writings. But she of herself, she has no knowledge concerning premillennial kingdom, although she wrote many of them. The same divine principle. So brothers and sisters, to repeat again, the restoration is in process, but there is a divinely appointed time when all things are to be restored. And that is in the judgment that pertains to the living. And one of the prominent subjects by which it is to be restored in the judgment that pertains to the living is the Bible creation calendar. And the reason that God restored the Bible creation calendar, because God is now asking all the saints to be translated to heaven without seeing death, to participate this divine eventuality, the antitypical Passover. Remember the statement in 7 Symbolic Code, 7 to 12, page 21. The antitypical Passover seal. So here in the General Conference Special, page 19 and page 20, it says, General Conference Special, pages 19 and 20. In doing all this, He sets in motion the power that is to restore all things. Hence Christ's positive declaration, Elijah truly shall first come and restore all things. Matthew 17 verse 11. Inevitably then, without His message, we would die in our ignorance and in our sins, never live to see the restoration completed. When does the restoration will be completed? In the judgment that pertains to the living. And of course, it was predicted beforehand that it must be antitypical Elijah the Tishbite, the only channel, the only medium that God will use in restoring the Bible creation calendar, the divinely appointed time when the restoration will be completed. We will continue this subject, brothers and sisters, and hoping that the good Lord will bless us and would help us. We love you, brethren, and hope to see you in God's kingdom. Thank you very much for listening. Have a beautiful, wonderful evening.